October 14, 2014, 9:17 a.m. Burbank, California. The glass doors of Stage 16 at Warner Bros. Swing shut behind him. The sound echoes longer than it should. Inside, 200 crew members are waiting. The set is fully built, a 1930s courtroom recreated down to the brass fixtures. The costume racks are pressed and tagged, call sheets printed, coffee steaming in paper cups with the film's code name stamped across the side. And yet no cameras roll. In a conference room just above the soundstage, an emergency meeting is unfolding. Studio executives, legal teams, distribution strategists dialing in from New York. The numbers from a recent merger have shifted overnight. A tax recalibration, a global slate reshuffle. This film no longer fits the model. Downstairs, the star of the project sits alone in his trailer. An A-list name, two-time Oscar nominee, box office draw, known for intensity, known for disappearing into roles. He has spent 8 months preparing for this character. He turned down 2 franchise offers, he lost weight, he met with historians, he called it the most important script of his career. And now, without warning, the movie is being indefinitely postponed. You can almost feel the air in that trailer, heavy, metallic, unreal. No scandal, no controversy, no meltdown. Just silence. By noon, the crew is dismissed. By 3 p.m., the trades have the headline, Studio Reevaluates Period Drama Amid Strategic Realignment. Strategic realignment. It sounds clean, professional, bloodless. But what does it mean to the person who built their next chapter around it? For the public, this film never existed. There are no trailers to mourn, no leaked scenes, no red carpet that didn't happen. But for him, something shifted that day. Because in Hollywood, momentum is oxygen, and oxygen just got thinner. The film wasn't canceled because it was bad. Early test screenings reportedly showed strong emotional impact. Insiders whispered about awards potential, but the studio's new corporate structure had different priorities: tentpoles, global franchises, streaming leverage. Prestige mid-budget dramas were suddenly labeled risk concentration. In boardrooms, art becomes line items. The actor understood this intellectually. He had been in the industry long enough, he knew films collapse all the time. But this one felt different. It wasn't just a job, it was a repositioning. For years, he had been navigating the space between commercial leading man and serious dramatic heavyweight. This project was meant to settle that question permanently. It was supposed to announce, he belongs here now. And now there would be no announcement. Only absence. Here, what people rarely consider about shelved films, the psychological math. Actors build their calendars 2 to 3 years in advance. Press cycles, award season visibility, magazine covers, it's all choreographed around releases. When a film disappears, the choreography collapses. He suddenly had 12 open months. No premiere, no Oscar campaign, no interviews reinforcing the new narrative of his career. Instead, he had something Hollywood fears more than failure: invisibility. For weeks, he kept a low profile. Publicly, he expressed continued partnership with the studio. Privately, he asked different questions. Had he miscalculated? Had he leaned too far into seriousness? Was he now perceived as less bankable? Because perception in Hollywood is currency. And when a project vanishes, perception gets murky. You can almost see him late at night, script pages still stacked on his desk, rereading monologues that no audience will ever hear. He didn't lose a role. He lost a turning point. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Instead of rushing to replace the gap, he did something rare. He waited. No surprise franchise signing, no safe romantic comedy, no prestige indie scramble. He stepped back. And in an industry addicted to constant visibility, that decision quietly redefined the power dynamic. Because sometimes the most radical move in Hollywood isn't choosing the next role. It's choosing none at all. What looked like a setback was about to become leverage. And the industry didn't even realize it yet. November 3, 2014, 7:40 p.m. Los Angeles. The Dolby Theater is glowing, flashbulbs detonate against black velvet, publicists move like air traffic controllers, every major star is here. Except him. His seat third row aisle remains empty. The camera cuts past it quickly. At home he watches none of it. In Hollywood, attendance is signaling, every appearance reinforces relevance, every red carpet keeps the machinery turning, agents call it staying warm. But he's going cold. Weeks turn into months, the trades stop mentioning his name, studio executives stop asking about his availability. At first it feels dangerous. Because in this industry, visibility is interpreted as vitality. If you're not seen, are you slipping? But something subtle begins to happen. Scarcity. Producers who once assumed they could call any time now hesitate. Is he interested? Is he unavailable? Is he reconsidering his direction? The silence creates intrigue. And intrigue shifts leverage. Hollywood runs on a psychological treadmill. The faster you move, the more it expects. Hit film, deliver another within 18 months. Awards buzz, capitalize immediately. Franchise momentum, lock in 3-picture deals. The unwritten rule: never pause. But pauses are powerful. Because when a star stops accepting roles, the industry recalculates around them. He begins declining scripts quietly, not loudly, not publicly, just a steady, polite no. He doesn't explain himself. And that lack of explanation becomes narrative oxygen. Was he rethinking commercial films? Was he building something bigger? Was he negotiating from a new place of control? The less he said, the more the speculation grew. You can almost feel the tension in agency offices. Do we know what he wants? No. Is he taking meetings? Not really. Absence in Hollywood is unsettling. It disrupts predictability. Behind the scenes, he is not idle. He is reading, observing, watching how studios pivot towards streaming, watching how IP dominates development slates, watching how actor-producers begin reshaping deals. He realizes something uncomfortable. As long as he is only talent for hire, he is replaceable. The canceled film exposed that. He had poured himself into a project he did not control, and when corporate priorities shifted, so did his trajectory. So he begins asking different questions. What if the next chapter isn't about choosing better roles, but about owning them? In private meetings, quiet, off-calendar conversations, he starts discussing producing credits, equity participation, back-end structures tied to creative authority, not just box office. These aren't headline moves. They're structural moves. He studies how figures like Reese Witherspoon transformed themselves through ownership, how Brad Pitt leveraged Plan B, how George Clooney shifted from actor to decision-maker. Power in Hollywood, he realizes, isn't loud. It's contractual. And absence gave him clarity. Because when you step off the treadmill, you can finally see who's controlling it. Months pass. Online chatter grows. Is he taking a break? Did that canceled film hurt him? Is his star fading? The narrative starts to tilt toward doubt. And here, where the psychological pressure intensifies. Because restraint can look like weakness. When offers slow, and they do slow, it tests conviction. Every quiet week whispers the same question. What if they forget? You can almost feel that doubt creeping in during early mornings, the phone quieter than usual, the industry moving on to fresher faces. But he holds the line. Because now the pause isn't accidental. It's intentional. Then something shifts. A streaming platform executive, newly empowered after aggressive expansion, reaches out. Not with a role. With a partnership proposal. Development control, executive producer credit, input on casting, a slate deal that spans multiple projects instead of one. 2 years earlier, he might have signed as lead actor and called it success. Now he negotiates from absence. And the terms change. Because when you're not chasing visibility, you can demand structure. The canceled film was meant to elevate him creatively. The pause elevated him strategically. By the time he returns to screens in a limited series he co-develops, the industry frame has shifted. He is no longer just an A-list actor. He is a stakeholder. And the difference is subtle but permanent. But this isn't just about one star. It's about a pattern emerging across Hollywood, a quiet rebellion against constant exposure. And once you notice it, you see it everywhere. March 12, 2018, 6:05 Manhattan. The city is barely awake. Steam rises from subway grates, delivery trucks idle at red lights. Inside a quiet production office overlooking the Hudson, he signs a contract. No photographers, no press release waiting in drafts, no studio lot fanfare. Just a pen gliding across paper, locking in an executive producer credit on a limited series he helped develop from a 3-page concept. 4 years earlier, he would have been signing a lead actor deal structured around opening weekend projections. Now the math is different. Ownership percentage, back-end participation, creative approval clauses, casting consultation, distribution strategy alignment. This is not glamour. This is infrastructure. And infrastructure lasts longer than applause. The shift didn't happen overnight. It happened in the silence after the canceled film, in those months when Hollywood assumed he was recalibrating emotionally. He was, but not in the way they thought. The industry often frames career pauses as vulnerability, exhaustion, reputational repair. But his pause was analytical. He had seen how quickly a studio merger erased years of creative effort, how easily a prestige project could be written off for quarterly earnings optics, how disposable even an A-list name becomes when strategy shifts. So instead of chasing the next headline role, he studied the system that had sidelined him. And he realized something crucial. Visibility is temporary, leverage is structural. You can almost picture those meetings, small conference rooms, coffee going cold, whiteboards filled with arrows connecting production companies to distribution platforms. He listens more than he speaks. He asks about international rights windows, about streaming data transparency, about development timelines that don't depend on theatrical release cycles. The executives begin to see him differently. Not just as talent, as a long-term partner. And here where the psychology deepens. Because stepping back from the spotlight requires ego discipline. Hollywood rewards validation loops, premieres, applause, trending moments. They're intoxicating, immediate, measurable. Ownership is slower. It doesn't trend. It compounds. And compounding requires patience in an industry wired for instant reaction. When the limited series finally premieres, it doesn't explode on opening weekend, it builds. Critics praise its restraint, its nuance, its long-form character development. And quietly in the credits, his name appears twice. Lead actor. Executive producer. Most viewers won't clock the difference. But the industry does. Because double credits signal negotiation strength. They signal that he is no longer simply cast, he is embedded. Meanwhile, something interesting happens across town. Another A-list star announces a hiatus, no scandal attached, just a statement about focusing on personal projects and long-term storytelling. Then another shifts into producing. Then another negotiates equity in exchange for reduced upfront salary. It starts to look less like coincidence, more like recalibration. Hollywood, once obsessed with overexposure, begins recognizing the strategic power of selective presence. When stars become less available, they become more valuable. Supply contracts, demand intensifies. And studios, now competing not just with each other but with tech platforms, are forced to sweeten deals. The power dynamic subtly tilts. But none of this erases the emotional reality of that first pause. Because there were nights early on when he wondered if stepping back was miscalculation disguised as courage. There were months when younger actors filled roles he might have taken, when box office charts featured names 10 years his junior. The fear wasn't public failure. It was cultural drift. In Hollywood, irrelevance rarely announces itself, it creeps. And resisting the urge to reinsert yourself into the noise takes psychological steadiness. He had to separate ego from strategy. That's harder than it sounds. Here's the irony. The canceled film that felt like a career interruption became the catalyst for structural evolution. Had it released, even successfully, he might have continued chasing prestige roles within the same system that controlled his trajectory. Instead, its disappearance exposed the fragility of momentum. And fragility forces redesign. By 2020, he isn't attending every awards show. He isn't saturating late-night interviews. He's selective, intentional, and when he does appear on screen or in headlines, it feels event-level. Not routine. Because the industry has recalibrated around his scarcity. Studios now approach him with partnership frameworks, not just scripts. Streamers pitch development slates, not cameo roles. His pause didn't shrink his power. It concentrated it. And yet, there's one final layer to this story most people overlook. Because power shifts aren't just external. They're internal. What does it do to a person, an actor trained to seek validation, when they choose restraint instead? What happens to identity when applause is no longer the primary metric? That answer changed him more than any contract ever could. September 5, 2022, 10:48 p.m. Venice, Italy. The lagoon is still. The festival lights ripple across the water like fractured gold. Applause spills out of the Sala Grande, sustained, deliberate, almost reverent. He stands near the back of the theater. Not center stage. Not front and center in the spotlight. Watching. The film that just premiered carries his name again in two places: actor, producer. But tonight feels different. Not because of awards buzz, not because of reviews. Because for the first time in years, he isn't measuring this moment by momentum. He's measuring it by control. There's a psychological shift that happens when someone steps off the validation treadmill long enough. At first, the silence feels like loss. Then it feels like clarity. Then it becomes recalibration. In the early days after the canceled film, his identity was tangled with trajectory. Every project was proof of ascent. Every release reinforced relevance. When that project disappeared, it felt like a subtraction of self. But absence did something applause never could. It separated who he was from how often he was seen. That's not easy in Hollywood. Because this industry equates presence with power: magazine covers, red carpets, streaming banners. But sustained presence without leverage is exposure. And exposure without ownership is dependency. He had lived that version already. The pause forced him to ask a question few A-listers openly confront. If the industry stops calling tomorrow, what do I actually control? The answer at first was uncomfortable. Not enough. And that realization is what rewired everything. He began building slowly: development meetings without announcements, partnerships without press, investments in storytelling pipelines rather than just performances. There's something psychologically stabilizing about ownership. It shifts you from being selected to selecting. From auditioning for cultural relevance to shaping it. And that internal shift changes posture. When he walks into meetings now, he isn't hopping for approval. He's assessing alignment. That difference is subtle but seismic. You can see it in interviews if you watch closely. He speaks less about career highs and more about long-term collaboration. Less about box office numbers, more about narrative longevity. There's no urgency in his tone anymore. No grasping at the next defining role. Because the defining moment already happened, and it wasn't on screen. It was the day he chose not to panic. Here's the broader industry truth this story reveals. Hollywood quietly recalibrates around those who refuse to be always available. Scarcity signals confidence. And confidence forces negotiation. When stars overexpose, studios dictate timelines. When stars withhold, studios adjust structures. It's not rebellion. It's leverage through restraint. It is becoming more common. In an era where content floods every platform, the rarest commodity isn't talent. It's intentional absence. But let's return to Venice. The applause fades, the lights lift. He steps forward finally to acknowledge the audience. The ovation isn't deafening, it's steady. Respectful. Sustained. And you can almost sense it. This isn't applause for a comeback. It's recognition of evolution. He didn't return louder. He returned differently. The unreleased film that once felt like a vanished opportunity now looks like a pivot point. Had it debuted as planned, it might have extended a successful run. Instead, its cancellation exposed the illusion of momentum-based power. And in that exposure, he discovered something stronger. Control isn't dominance. It's choice. The choice to wait. The choice to build quietly. The choice to step back when the industry expects you to lean in. By the time younger actors ask him for advice now, his answer isn't about landing bigger roles. It's about patience, about reading contracts, about understanding distribution models, about knowing when to say no even when the spotlight is warm. Because legacy isn't shaped by constant visibility. It's shaped by strategic restraint. Hollywood will always celebrate meteoric rises. It loves speed, buzz, explosive premieres. But power often grows in stillness. In the months no one writes about. In the roles you don't take. In the meetings that never make headlines. The career pause that once looked like a setback quietly redefined the architecture of his influence. And most audiences will never trace it back to that silent morning in Burbank when a film disappeared before it ever began. But he will, because that was the moment applause stopped being the goal, and authorship became the strategy.